Good evening, everyone. We are proceeding rapidly towards the end of First Samuel. Today we are covering First Samuel chapter 29. Now, understand that First Samuel chapter 29 is a part of a series of chapters where David has sought refuge in the land of the Philistines. In fact, David had been received very well by Achish. Now, Achish has seen or have seen David as a good partner. And yesterday we saw that Achish made David his bodyguard, has given David and his men a city called Ziklag for them to live. Now, all of these becomes the background of chapter 29. Now, the Philistines gathered together all their armies to affect, uh, or you call it the Afekah or affect, while the Israelites were camping by the spring, the fountain which is in Jezreel. Now, remember, Jezreel is the plains below Mount Carmel. And David had one wife that came from Carmel and one wife that came from Jezreel. And so the Jezreel part is really a place where battles have always been fought. And the Philistines are about to gather and south of that area. The The next part here is that you find that they are called the lords of the Philistines, who are proceeding on by hundreds and by thousands. And David and his men were proceeding in the rear with Achish. Now, this is interesting when we talk about the lords. Um, you could say that they are the leaders. They are the leaders, and they are in front. These are the lords, and they are moving towards Jezreel. Now, behind them, there are lots of them behind. So there are the hundreds, there are the thousands. And then at the back, you would have Achish. And with Achish will be David, because David is his bodyguard, and David and his 600 men. Now, that would be probably how the formation be. And so, what we are talking about is that this part here is at the back of the formation for battle. Now, the discussion in verse 3, the commanders, these are the army commanders, not just the lords and the leaders of the Philistines, but the generals of the Philistines said to Achish. Now, understand this. The question is, what are these Hebrews? What are these Hebrews doing here? Now, understand that this word doing here is supplied, but it is good to go, because the implication or the inference in the Hebrew would be what 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 is really David and his men doing with the Philistines in battle? That is very surprising to them. And so you find that Achish said to the commanders of the Philistines, says, is this not David, the servant of Saul, the king of Israel, who has been with me these days, or these years, right? These days, or these years. So I have found no fault in him from the day he deserted to this day. Now, this word deserted literally means that he has fallen, that he fell, right? He fell would be falling from the grace of Saul and falling into place with me to this day. This is very important because of these words. I have found no fault. Now, the idea of no fault means I have not found anything. I think this would be uh, a way or to explain no fault, no speck. How would you say? Yeah, no speck, no dirt. And so this would be an idea of blameless. There was nothing wrong with David from the day he left Israel and joined Achish. Now, that is the reason why Achish really liked David. He sees David as the servant of Saul, who is the king of Israel, who has been with me these days. This would be together with. So all of these tells us that David and Achish has a pretty good relationship. In fact, very, very good relationship. Now in verse 4, the commanders of the Philistines had a different opinion. Verse 4 says they were angry. Now, this word angry gives us the idea of displeased. They are not happy at all. They were furious. I think all of these is good. They were about to burst out in anger. That's the condition. They were angry. It's getting out of hand, right? They were enraged. That's the way it is seen. With him, who is him? Achish. And the commanders of the Philistines said to him, who is him? Achish. All right. We're talking about the commanders and Achish. Now understand, Achish is the king of Gath. But the commanders who are leaders in the battle with Israel is not going to see this in a favorable manner. Now, you need to understand that the Philistines have always been suspicious of the Israelites. And now, when Achish, the king of Gath, has an Israelite, and not just any Israelite, a servant of Saul, maybe he has turned coat on Saul, but he is nevertheless still an Israelite. So he says, make the man go back that he may return to his place where you have assigned him. Where would that be? Assigned him would be as a bodyguard, right? This is a bodyguard. And not a soldier in the battle. And so do not let him go down to battle with us because he's a bodyguard. Or in the battle, he may become an adversary to us. He could be fighting us when he's down there. For what could this man make himself acceptable to his Lord? How did David make himself very acceptable to Achish? Would it not be with the heads of these men? Now, what does that mean? The idea here is the how should we say, um the commanders of the Philistines cannot understand how Achish could bring an Israelite into war. And the commanders are very concerned that when the war ensues with the Israelites, that these could be detrimental to the Philistines. They could be fighting the Philistines during battle. And so that was the condition, because they were at the back. And can you imagine, in front they would fight the Israelites, and at the back, David and his 600 men would slaughter in. That would not do at all. The commanders reminded Achish, is this not David whom they sing? The people sing in the dances, saying, Saul has slain his thousands and David his 10,000s. What does this mean? It means that David is far greater as a warrior than Saul. And so in front, they are facing Saul, and at the back, you've got David, who is able to slay his 10,000s. At the back of the Philistines, not a chance. Verse 6. And so Achish called David and said to him, that is what needs to be done. As the Lord lives. Well, this is very interesting, because Achish is swearing by the name of God. And it looks like in those days, people know God, but Achish, the Philistines, are seeing more than God, more than Jehovah. They have other gods. Although they recognize Jehovah is the only God to the Israelites. And so Achish says, well, as God lives, as your God lives, you have been upright, Yashar. You've been being very straight, right? Been very straight. And that's the perception of Achish. And you're going out and you're coming in with me in the army are pleasing in my sight. Now, what does pleasing in my sight means? It is tov in my eyes. And with this, we need to see this tov, or good, is in the eyes of the beholder. And so in the eyes of Achish, yes, David is good, pleasing. And then you see the second part here. I have not found evil in you from the day of your coming to me to this day. All this while, when you see that Achish sees good, Achish do not see evil. There is no ra, evil. It is also in the eyes of the beholder. So in the eyes of Achish, he can only see tov with David, not ra. So nevertheless, you are not pleasing in the sight of the Lord. It means not pleasing means not tov. Not tov in the eyes of the Philistine commanders. And so it is important, when it is tov, it's from the eyes. It is not tov, it's also from the eyes. Now, one of this, the things that you can see from here, I think we can safely say that although we have always contrasted tov with ra, right? The contrast in contrast. But from this verse, you can say that the opposite of tov is not ra. When you have tov, you can also have not tov. Not tov is not ra. Not tov is just not tov. Not ra may not be tov. So not ra could be neutral. It doesn't change anything. So tov, the opposite of tov, need not be ra, but it is not ra. Not they are not happy with what they are seeing. So this is not pleasing. So that the eyes, when they are looking at David, it disturbs them. It is not to say that David is evil in their eyes. It is to say that David is not pleasing, not good in their eyes. It doesn't mean that David is going to do evil in their eyes. That's what I'm trying to point out. Now, certainly, you could always talk about Tov versus Ra, the good versus evil, the knowledge of good and evil. They're always coming in a pair. But this verse 6 tells us that what is not pleasing is basically to say that it is the opposite of pleasing. Because when Achish saw David as tov, as pleasing, the Lord saw David as not tov. That's why this passage is very careful in not using ra. Because not tov just means I just don't like him to be there. It is not that David is seen to be evil in the eyes of these commanders. I hope we are clear in this manner. In verse 7, so Achish so decides the best thing to do is not to fight with the lords of the Philistines. So now, therefore, return and go. Now, always know that this is an A and a B. To return is to go. Go where? Go back to where you came from and go in peace. Now, the idea of go in peace, and peace here is shalom. It means that David can return without feeling bad, without feeling that he has, no, maybe he has not done his job with Achish as his bodyguard. And so Achish is saying, it's okay. Go, walk in peace, so that you may not displease the lords of the Philistines. Now, we have another word here. May not displease. This does not mean not tov. This means to make ra or evil. Now, we can see, again, we have tov versus ra. And so we have a situation of not tov, may not be ra, but to do ra is very specific. The idea here is if David does not leave, if David does not go back, then the not tov can move to become ra. So you can see the idea of not tov is just not tov. It is neutral. It's just that they're not happy with you being there. But when it moves to ra, it means that now it is going to become a major problem. Now, David said to Achish, what have I done? What have I done? And what have you found in your servant from the day when I came before you to this day? That I may not go and fight against the enemies of my Lord the king? So this question is that David is saying that he is loyal to Achish. Doesn't matter where he comes from, but he is loyal. From the day he joined Achish until this day, that he has always defended Achish. Now we have this, but Achish replied to David, I know that you are pleasing in my sight, like an angel of God. This is like a malak. It's a malak of God. Yes, you are very tov, right? In my eyes. In Achish's eyes, as the king of God, David is number one. But he says, nevertheless, the commanders of the Philistines have said. Now, the commanders of the Philistines may be more than God. It could be all of the Philistines together. And they said, he must not go up with us into the battle. And this is strict condition. The Hebrew cannot join the Philistines to fight with Saul. Verse 10. Now then, arise early in the morning. Wake up early in the morning with the servants of your Lord who have come with you, the 600. And as soon as you have arisen early in the morning and have light. Now understand, it would be dark. Okay? It would be dark at night. But the moment you can see daylight, right? If you can actually see daylight coming out, then it's time to go. So then go, depart, leave. Now, what does this word actually mean? It means walk. Just go home. So Achish is very concerned not to jeopardize the battle plans of the Philistines and to appease the commanders of the Philistines. David must go. And David left. Verse 11. So David arose early, he and his men, to walk in the morning to return. This is to shuv, to the land of the Philistines. Where do you think they are going? They are going back to Ziklag, the land, the town where Achish gave to David and his men. And the Philistine went up to Jezreel. Remember, they are moving to Jezreel. They were camped at Aphek, and they are moving northwards to Jezreel, where Saul was encamped. And so when David leaves, the commanders of the Philistines will have no more worry. And this is chapter 29. Now, when we get to chapter 30, you would find that when David went back to Ziklag, many things would have happened. And next week, when we continue on Monday, we will find that this is a very important set of decisions for the future king of Israel as to how he will manage all his men in a just manner. And with this, we come to the end of our session today. The Hebrew word for adversary is Satan. Verse 4, adversary is Satan. And with this, let me explain a little bit. The word actually means adversary. It means an opponent, one who stands against. That's all it means, right? Adversary. And the Hebrew word is Satan. Satan is a noun that is defined by the verb itself. there is a verb for Satan actually. So the word here is Satan. Satan comes from the verb. This is a noun. It comes from the verb also Satan, and it is to act as an adversary, right? To resist or oppose. And so with this, I think we just need to understand that Satan is not an angel, definitely not a fallen angel in the Old Testament. And you find that it is merely a very normal word, I would say, that the narrative is describing that maybe David could become a Satan to us, right? This is David. That is what they're saying. Maybe David, if they come in with battle, David could be a Satan to us. He could oppose us from the back. And that is how the word Satan is actually used. And not as the character in Job chapter 1 and 2.
So the Hebrew Bible actually uses the word Satan, is it?
Yes, exactly. The Hebrew Bible actually uses the word Satan.